The patient on the table was dying. His heart had stopped, no pulse. 3 young doctors had tried in succession, none could succeed. At that moment, the elderly janitor from the corridor quietly entered the operating room and said, "If I may." The head physician shouted angrily, "This is not your place." What they didn't know was that within minutes, the hospital director would arrive demanding answers, and the truth about Samuel Morrison would change everything. But before we dive into this incredible story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced or witnessed something like this, share it in the comments below. If you want to be the first to hear about more inspiring stories like this one, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Samuel Morrison wakes up at 4:30 a.m. every morning, just as he has for the past 40 years. At 72, he walks from his small apartment on Maple Street to St. Mary's Hospital, where he now pushes a mop after spending 30 years as chief of cardiac surgery at Metropolitan General Hospital on the other side of town. His morning routine is sacred: black coffee, no sugar. He reads the obituaries first, a habit that started when too many of his former patients began appearing there. Samuel wears the same blue janitor's uniform. The ID badge on his chest reads Samuel, Maintenance. What it doesn't say is that for 30 years he was Dr. Samuel Morrison, Chief of Cardiac Surgery at Metropolitan General. He arrives at the hospital at 5:45, clocks in, and begins his rounds. He starts on the 3rd floor. Seeing the cardiac wing makes his heart ache with memories. At Metropolitan General, he had been the chief of this very department. Now at St. Mary's, no one knows him. He's just another quiet, elderly janitor. The younger staff don't know him at all. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, 32, head of emergency medicine, treats Samuel with polite indifference. To her, he's simply the quiet old man who somehow always knows where to find extra supplies. She has no idea that Samuel spent 30 years as chief at the city's most prestigious hospital. 6 months ago, he was forced into retirement at Metropolitan General. Hospital policy, they said. Mandatory retirement at 70. His hands were steadier than surgeons half his age, but age discrimination was wrapped in corporate policy. His pension barely covered his modest apartment. His late wife Margaret's cancer treatment bills had drained their savings. He tried to find work at Metropolitan General, but their age policy blocked him. When the janitorial position opened at St. Mary's, Samuel swallowed his pride and applied. Here, no one knew his past. Now he works nights and weekends at St. Mary's, invisible to medical staff. He empties wastebaskets containing medical journals with articles he wrote at Metropolitan General. He cleans conference rooms where his innovations are taught, but no one here knows he's the author. But Samuel doesn't complain. He does his job thoroughly, arriving early and staying late. The hospital has never been cleaner, though no one notices. That Tuesday started like any other. Samuel was restocking supplies when ambulance sirens began wailing. Male, 34, massive myocardial infarction, he heard the paramedic report. Lost him twice en route, got him back. He's circling the drain. Dr. Hayes took charge immediately. Get him to Trauma Bay 3. The patient was Michael Thompson, a construction worker who'd collapsed on the job. Young, otherwise healthy, but his heart had essentially exploded from a massive blockage. "We need to get him to surgery," Dr. Hayes announced after reviewing scans. But Dr. Kevin Park, the young cardiac surgeon on call, looked uncertain. "This is really complex. The blockage is in a position I've never seen before. We might need to wait for Dr. Richardson." "Richardson is in Seattle until tomorrow," Hayes replied sharply. "This man doesn't have until tomorrow." Samuel watched from the corner as the young team struggled with a case that he would have handled without hesitation. The blockage was complex, but not impossible. He'd seen similar cases dozens of times. Dr. Park attempted the procedure, but his inexperience showed. 20 minutes in, the patient's condition deteriorated rapidly. The heart monitor flatlined. "We're losing him," a nurse shouted. Dr. Hayes jumped in to assist, but even her skills weren't enough. They managed to restart the heart twice, but it failed again within minutes. "Time of death," Dr. Hayes began, exhaustion in her voice. "Wait," said Samuel quietly from the doorway. Every head turned toward him. Dr. Hayes looked annoyed. "Samuel, we're in the middle of an emergency. Please continue your cleaning elsewhere." Samuel stepped forward, eyes on the heart images. "If I may, doctor, I can see the problem." "Excuse me?" Dr. Hayes's voice carried confusion and irritation. "I need you to leave this area immediately." But Samuel was already moving toward the patient. "The blockage isn't where you think it is. Look at the posterior wall. There's a secondary occlusion causing the primary to shift." Dr. Park stared at him. "How do you—" "Because I've seen this pattern before," Samuel said calmly, "many times. Your approach won't work because you're treating the symptom, not the cause." Dr. Hayes was about to call security when something in Samuel's tone stopped her. There was an authority there that seemed out of place. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. "Someone who can save this man's life, if you'll let me." Dr. Hayes made a decision that would change everything. "Show me." Samuel moved to the sink and began scrubbing his hands with practiced efficiency. "The posterior occlusion is creating a pressure differential. Dr. Park, you need to approach from the lateral wall first, relieve the pressure, then address the primary blockage." As he spoke, his entire demeanor changed. Gone was the humble janitor, replaced by someone who spoke with decades of surgical authority. "I don't understand," Dr. Park admitted. "Then watch and learn," Samuel said, moving to the patient. His hands, which had seemed old while pushing a mop, became steady and sure with surgical instruments. What happened next was remarkable. Samuel's technique was unlike anything the young doctors had seen. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of vast experience. Each cut precise, each suture perfect. "Incredible," whispered Dr. Hayes. "Where did you learn to do this?" Samuel didn't answer immediately, focused entirely on the delicate procedure. After 43 minutes, the heart monitor began showing a strong, steady rhythm. "He's stable," announced the cardiac nurse, amazement in her voice. "All vitals are normal." Samuel stepped back from the table, removing his gloves. "He'll need monitoring for the next 24 hours, but he should make a full recovery." The room was dead quiet. Everyone stared at Samuel as if seeing him for the first time. "Who are you?" Dr. Hayes finally asked. Samuel hung up his surgical gown and reached for his janitor's uniform. "Someone who used to work here." "That's not an answer," Dr. Hayes pressed. "No janitor performs surgery like that. That was masterful." Before Samuel could respond, Dr. Richard Blackwood, the hospital director, burst into the trauma bay with 2 administrators. "What happened here?" Blackwood demanded. "I got calls about an unauthorized person performing surgery." Dr. Hayes looked between Samuel and the director. "Dr. Blackwood, this man just saved Michael Thompson's life. Without him, we would have lost the patient." Blackwood's eyes narrowed as he focused on Samuel. Something seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. "Sir, I'm going to need to see identification and credentials," Blackwood said officially. "Dr. Blackwood," Samuel interrupted quietly, "you hired me 6 months ago. Samuel Morrison, employee ID 7749. The name hit Blackwood like a physical blow. His face went pale as recognition dawned. "Dr. Samuel Morrison?" he whispered. "The Dr. Morrison?" Samuel nodded once. "I believe we've met before." The silence was deafening. Dr. Blackwood had heard of Samuel during his residency, the legendary chief of cardiac surgery at Metropolitan General. He'd read Samuel's groundbreaking papers. But you're working as a janitor here?" "Metropolitan General forced me into retirement 6 months ago. Since my pension doesn't cover my expenses, I took the only job available. Here, no one knew my background." Dr. Hayes looked shocked. "You're Dr. Morrison? The Dr. Morrison who developed the Morrison technique? Who wrote the textbook we all studied?" Samuel picked up his mop bucket. "That was a long time ago." "Dr. Morrison," Dr. Blackwood said, his voice shaking, "I had no idea you were working here. When Metropolitan General implemented their retirement policy, I had bills to pay, Dr. Blackwood. Life doesn't pause for retirement policies." The weight of the situation settled over everyone. One of the most respected cardiac surgeons in the city had been mopping floors while young doctors struggled with cases he could solve in his sleep. Dr. Park finally spoke. "Dr. Morrison, I've read every paper you've published. You revolutionized cardiac surgery. Why didn't you say anything?" Samuel adjusted his grip on the mop handle. "Would it have mattered? The board made their decision. Age discrimination is legal when it's called policy." 2 hours later, Samuel sat in Dr. Blackwood's office, still wearing his janitor's uniform. "Dr. Morrison, I want to formally apologize for what happened. I'm prepared to offer you a position as chief consultant in cardiac surgery," Blackwood said. "Full salary, benefits, and complete autonomy." "And the mandatory retirement policy?" Samuel asked. Blackwood shifted uncomfortably. "We can make exceptions for special circumstances." Samuel stood up slowly. "Dr. Blackwood, I appreciate the offer, but I need some time to think about it." The next morning, Samuel arrived wearing surgical scrubs. Dr. Blackwood had called an emergency staff meeting. The conference room was packed. Word had spread quickly about what happened in Trauma Bay 3. Yesterday, this hospital made a mistake that nearly cost a patient his life. More importantly, we learned that we had one of the country's most respected cardiac surgeons working as a janitor because of inflexible age policies. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Effective immediately, Dr. Samuel Morrison is returning to active duty as our Chief of Cardiac Surgery and Director of Medical Education. We're implementing new policies to ensure that experience and competence, not age, determine a physician's value. Samuel stepped forward. "Thank you, Dr. Blackwood. But I have one condition. I want to establish a mentorship program. Experienced physicians nearing retirement will work alongside younger doctors, sharing knowledge instead of being pushed aside. We'll call it the Wisdom Initiative." Dr. Hayes started applauding. Soon the entire room joined in. Samuel raised his hand for quiet. "Yesterday taught us all something important. In medicine, we can't afford to waste wisdom. Every gray hair in this room represents thousands of saved lives, countless hours of experience and knowledge that can't be found in textbooks. Michael Thompson is alive today not because of my age, but despite how you viewed it. How many other patients might we save if we stopped seeing experience as a liability and started recognizing it as our greatest asset?" The program launched 6 weeks later. The hospital's mortality rate dropped by 23% in the first quarter. Dr. Hayes became Samuel's first official mentee, learning surgical techniques not taught in medical school. Samuel kept his janitor's uniform hanging in his office closet, a reminder of how easily society discards its most valuable resources. The story spread beyond St. Mary's Hospital. Medical schools began reaching out to Samuel for lectures on both surgical techniques and ageism in medicine. He became an advocate for older physicians. Michael Thompson made a full recovery. When he learned who had saved his life, he insisted on meeting Samuel. The construction worker simply shook Samuel's hand and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I never give up on anyone," Samuel replied. "That's not who I am." 6 months later, Samuel received a call from the American College of Surgeons. They wanted to present him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. At the ceremony, Samuel stood before an audience of medical professionals. His acceptance speech was brief but powerful. "Medicine is not just about textbook knowledge or cutting-edge technology," he said. "It's about wisdom gained through experience, compassion earned through years of service, and the understanding that every patient deserves our absolute best effort. I spent 6 months being invisible in a hospital while young doctors struggled with cases I could solve. That invisibility taught me something crucial. Our value doesn't diminish with age. It only becomes harder for others to see. It's our responsibility to make sure it remains visible." The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. Today, Samuel Morrison continues to work at St. Mary's Hospital. The Wisdom Initiative has expanded to over 200 hospitals nationwide. Thousands of experienced physicians who were forced into premature retirement have returned to active practice. Samuel still arrives at work early, though now he carries a stethoscope instead of a mop. Every day, when he passes by the janitor's closet, he nods respectfully to the current cleaning staff. He knows what it means to be invisible, and he makes sure no one in his hospital ever feel that way again. Michael Thompson visits the hospital every year on the anniversary of his heart attack. He brings his wife and 2 children to meet the man who gave him a second chance at life. The last conversation they had, Michael asked Samuel why he came back to medicine after being treated so poorly. Samuel's answer was simple: "Because this is who I am. Not who I was, not who others think I should be. This is who I am, and no policy or prejudice can change that." Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won in operating rooms or boardrooms. Sometimes they're won in the quiet moments, when someone chooses dignity over bitterness, purpose over resentment, and service over self-pity. And sometimes the most important surgery isn't performed on a patient's body, but on society's assumptions about age, value, and human worth. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and hit the notification bell to be the first to know about more inspiring content. And remember that wisdom comes in many forms, and the person you overlook today might be the hero you need tomorrow.